What does your financial advisor think about Bitcoin? Have you asked them about Bitcoin? Have you talked to them about Bitcoin? And even if you have talked to them about Bitcoin, should you trust their answers? How do you know if they're even necessary or not? Bitcoin people, like myself, tend to share our opinions about Bitcoin quite frequently, and likewise financial advisors often do the same. And I think it's important for you to consider the biases and the strengths and the weaknesses of both your financial advisors and the people like me. And perhaps there's common ground there you may not be aware of. And I think in this conversation or discussion I'm going to present to you today, I think there will be new thoughts for you to consider if you have a financial advisor. Do I think financial advisors are worth it? I do. And here's why. I think the majority of what financial advisors do actually is not in the business of financial advice. I think most of what financial advisors do is managing human psychology. If you're a financial advisor, your job, your goal is to help your clients, whether they're 30 years old or 60 years old, take the money that they earn, save their money, and preserve their purchasing power into the future. And don't let them panic sell their stocks, or don't let them buy some sort of scam. Don't let them destroy themselves with bad choices financially. Help your clients with the budget. Help your clients understanding their mortgage. What kind of mortgage can they afford? With their spending habits. What are they investing in? And how much are they withdrawing every year? These are the kinds of questions that, yes, a lot of them are numerical, and yes, a lot of them do have to deal with finance directly, but so much of it is simply managing human fear and greed. And I do think that if you're watching this and you haven't studied a lot of personal finance and you don't have a degree or education or any sort of experience in managing money, I do think that's probably very useful for you to have someone that's your ally, that's your helper by your side, that's going to encourage you to pursue good habits, that's going to help you consider the costs and the benefits of your decisions for next year, for 5 years from now, for even 30, 40, 50 years from now in your retirement, and for your kids, and for the legacy you leave behind. I think that is worth it. And I do think that a lot of what financial advisors do is that. And I want to make that perfectly clear. However, financial advisors are humans. And all humans have biases. I mean, it's the whole point why we need financial advisors in the first place. When stocks are down, we like to panic sell. When stocks are going up, we like to go all in at the very top and see our money melt away. And so we all have our biases, we all have our blind spots, and that's what financial advisors do. They help us reduce our emotion from our investing plan. And financial advisors do the same thing. They are also emotional creatures, just like you. That's why you need them. Hopefully, if they do their job well and they have a good education and they've really thought things through, they have much more reason and much more logic than emotion. But at the end of the day, all human beings have our blind spots. And so the only concern to you for your financial advisor is, what are their blind spots? Hopefully they have fewer blind spots than you because they're much more well-read, much more educated than you on the subject. But where could they be missing something? And that is where I have concerns. If your financial advisor is 100% pro-Bitcoin, they want you to take everything, sell it all for Bitcoin, go all in right now, you should probably face that recommendation with some skepticism. You really should. And I'm saying that as someone that does have a high allocation to Bitcoin, that does advocate for Bitcoin, that does make YouTube videos like this and articles and the film working on everything else. Like, as someone that puts a lot of energy into Bitcoin education, and content creation, you should be skeptical if your financial advisor is 100% certain on Bitcoin. Because that means that they might be blind to threats to Bitcoin. And I say that for myself too. I wonder all the time, literally every day, I wonder, what am I missing? How am I wrong about my Bitcoin thesis? How am I wrong about my allocate? What am I missing here? Could I be wrong? I think about it all the time. And the probability that you're not thinking about that, if you're 100% in on something, is probably pretty high. And so that's something I try to do to avoid that. I try to check myself for biases. But the opposite is true as well. If your financial advisor is 100% against Bitcoin, not open to it, not desiring to learn about it, that should be a major red flag as well. Major red flag. In the same way that you should have skepticism with me for being all in Bitcoin, you should have an equal amount of skepticism, and I would argue more skepticism, for someone that is 100% against it. Because, again, they probably are coming to that conclusion from a set of biases that you really need to think about. Why are these biases there and where they're coming from? Now, I'm okay if people disagree with me about Bitcoin. Like, really, I don't mind. I know a lot of people that disagree with me about Bitcoin. I know many financial advisors. I know many real estate investors. I know many stock investors from all walks of life across the United States, across the world, in fact. And there are plenty of disagreements about Bitcoin. I know people that are as all in on Bitcoin as I am, and yet they have great disagreements about certain things about Bitcoin or its adoption or its pros or cons or difficulties or challenges or opportunities for the future. I know a lot of people that are interested in Bitcoin but aren't as passionate as I am on it, and that are open to, there's a wide range, and I am fine with varying opinions. And so I want to make that perfectly clear. If your financial advisor disagrees with me on Bitcoin, that's fine. However, there are certain things that are inexcusable. Okay? Your financial advisor's job is to do the diligence and do the homework for you. Okay? In the same way that you don't have to understand, okay, you watching right now, you don't have to understand how the bond market works to invest in bonds. Okay, you don't have to understand how the Treasury and the Federal Reserve works and Congress, and you don't have to understand the whole American governmental system and the whole monetary system of the United States. You don't have to understand all of that in order to invest in bonds, because it's so technical, it's so complicated, and it would take you so many hours. That's what you hire your financial advisor for, because your financial advisor has done that work. They have put in that diligence of understanding this is what a bond is, this is yield curves, this is this and this, and this is that. They've done the work of understanding the mechanics of how bonds work, the mechanics of how stocks work, the mechanics of a portfolio allocation. They've done that work for you, and they simplify it for you to explain it so that you make the proper decision. Okay? And what I'm saying is inexcusable for your financial advisor is not coming to a different conclusion than I. They can come to whatever conclusion they want. What I am saying is inexcusable is if they do not understand the mechanics behind Bitcoin. Bitcoin has been around for 15 years. Okay? It has become a major global asset. Whether you like it or you hate it, that's just the truth. Okay? It is one of the most popular searched assets in the world, and so even if they don't like it, they need to understand it enough to talk about it with their clients. It has been pursued by BlackRock and Fidelity and many other organizations for years now. We have ETFs on the horizon, at least supposedly at some point in the near future. We have companies putting it on their balance sheets, and we have it as legal tender in multiple sovereign territories and nations. And El Salvador obviously is the most famous example. Okay? It is inexcusable if your financial advisor has not done that due diligence. In the same way, it would be equally inexcusable if they could not explain to you how the stock market works. Okay? If your financial advisor does not know if the U.S. stock market is open on U.S. holidays or not, they should not be your financial advisor. If your financial advisor does not know how the Treasury and the Federal Reserve operate their bonds and where the profits go from these bonds, they should not be your financial advisor. And in the same way, if your financial advisor does not know basic mechanics of what Bitcoin is and how it works, that is inexcusable. Okay, they can say it's complicated, they can say it's hard to understand. Okay, so is the bond market. Okay, it's their job to do that diligence for you. So, in my recommendation, here are some questions you should ask your financial advisor in order to assess if they have done that homework for you. Number one, just straight up ask them, have they taken the time to learn about Bitcoin and other digital assets, cryptocurrencies, NFTs, altcoins, whatever you want to call them? Have they done that homework? Have they looked into these assets at all, more than simply listening to it on MSNBC or some, Fox or whatever? Have they done more than just reading headlines and watching the news? And if so, ask them how much. Okay? If they have done that and they are not supportive of Bitcoin, or they are not willing to consider it, or willing to consider recommend it, ask them why. I think that answer will be very telling for you. Third, you should ask them, what is the difference between proof of work and proof of stake? You should be able to ask them that, and they should be able to answer that immediately without needing any time for researching it further. That is a basic of understanding Bitcoin and other digital assets. If your financial advisor cannot explain to you in simple layman's terms what the difference is between proof of work and proof of stake, it is equally inexcusable is not understanding the difference between the Federal Reserve and the Treasury Department. Okay? It's the same level of technical ignorance that really should have you call into question what's the real understanding of this asset. Okay. And again, that's not an opinion thing. They can have their preference to which they like. I'm encouraging you to ask technical questions. Third question. They should be able to answer who Hal Finney is. They should be able to answer that. You may not know who he is, and that's fine. And maybe they maybe have heard the name, but they don't. If they don't know who he is or why he was important in Bitcoin's history, that's a really big deal. It's in the same way, if your financial advisor does not know who Jerome Powell is, or if your financial advisor does not know who JP Morgan is, or your financial advisor has never heard of George Soros, or, these are names they should know. Okay, Hal Finney is probably one of, if not the most important name for someone that is researching Bitcoin to know. And I'm not saying Satoshi Nakamoto here, because most people have heard that name on mainstream news and television. Hal Finney is the name they should have heard of definitely and know about definitely if they've actually done more work than just listen to news headlines. Okay, and finally, another question I encourage you to ask them is if they can explain the difficulty adjustment. Do they know what that is? Which digital assets have a difficulty adjustment? What's the importance of it? Why was it an innovation or discovery, depending if you're in that camp or whatever? Point is, these are questions you should ask them. These are things you really should think about, okay? And if you don't know the answers to these questions, that's fine. I'm not going to tell you what they are now. Your financial advisor should know that, okay? In the same way, again, like I said before, your financial advisor should know how Congress works. They should know how the debt ceiling of the United States works. They should know how a 401k works and the tax implications of that, or at least be able to give you a general enough idea to then recommend you to the proper CPA for your tax implications. They should know these things. And in the same way with Bitcoin, they should know these things. And so, what is my personal concern with financial advisors? We have to consider what they have studied and what they are doing for you. The job, again, like I said at the beginning of this video, the job of a financial advisor is to help you, guide you, make proper decisions, have proper allocations, take your money and put it somewhere that's going to preserve its purchasing power. Or take your dollars and go out and pursue more dollars so that down the road, when you retire, when you need to have a regular income, or when you're not working anymore, you have your purchasing power preserved. That's their job. Okay? Let me put it slightly differently. The money is broken. The money is broken. It dies 2% every single year. We have an inflation target of 2%. Okay? The money is in decline because the money debases. The money inflates. And so, their job is to help you preserve your purchasing power via assets, via securities, via commodities like gold, real estate, bonds, and stocks, mutual funds, money market accounts, CDs, whatever. Their job is to help you pick what assets that you can use to preserve your purchasing power in the face of a slowly declining currency. Okay? And so then the question arises, what is the main blind spot? The main blind spot is that all works and that all makes sense and they're probably going to be really helpful until the moment there is a currency that does not do that. Until the moment there is a currency that does not die at 2% every single year. That, I think, is the Achilles heel of the entire financial advisory industry, of that entire line of thinking. They go to school for years, 4 years, 6 years, perhaps even longer in some cases. They go to all sorts of conferences, they have all sorts of meetings, they have higher ups and people below them. Their whole industry The whole topic is studying models, studying trends, studying allocations, studying Sharpe ratios, studying ways at which to preserve your purchasing power in the face of a declining currency. That's their job. Their brain has been trained for thousands and thousands of hours with hundreds, thousands, and in some cases tens of thousands of clients over the course of 5 years, 10 years, or 30 years at preserving their purchasing power in the face of this declining currency. And so when you bring in a currency that does not behave in the same manner, it's extremely difficult for them to understand. That's not implying they're any dumber than I am. It's just their brain has been trained in a certain way for an extremely long period of time. In the same way that you can train a pianist a certain way, they're not going to suddenly become a race car driver. Their brain has not been trained. It's a different line of thinking. It's a different set of skills. And one metaphor I always use about this is the horse versus the locomotive. If you are a professional horse breeder or trainer, your job is not to find the most effective way to transport humans across land. Your job is to breed the best horse. Okay? That's your job. And so if you are in the early 1800s and you are the best horse trainer in the world, you have trained your brain on finding ways to breed better horses and have better coaches. And, have a better horse that's stronger, that's faster. And so if then I come along and I say, my friend, you're good at what you do, but there's this iron horse, they're inherently going to have trouble with that. They are going to have difficulty understanding how a lifeless hunk of metal can move faster, for longer, for cheaper than a horse. They're going to have trouble comprehending that. A iron horse that moves on rail and runs on coal, it's miraculous to them, and steam. It's completely counterintuitive to everything that they have come to understand. Everything that makes sense to them is flipped on its head. We're replacing horsepower that runs on hay with locomotion. And that world brings about an entirely different set of implications. And I would argue it's the same thing here. Your financial advisor has been trained their entire schooling and their entire career to protect you against debasement. And so therefore, the one Achilles heel to them, the one bias I think that they have is that they are missing the implications of a currency without debasement. And this is what I believe that implication is. Right now, we give all these assets monetary premium. Real estate, gold, stocks, bonds especially. We give these things monetary premium because our currency debases. Energy flows away from the currency and into your stocks, into your bonds, into your gold. But if we had a currency that was not debasing, monetary energy would flow the exact same way. And I would argue that we are leaving the ancient world with a currency that's always dying to where money is always flowing, pumping the stock market, pumping the real estate market, pumping the bond market up and up and up forever, up to the right. I would argue we are transitioning. We are already transitioning into a world where the precise opposite is true. We are no longer going to be living in a world where real estate prices, stock prices, bond prices, gold prices continuously go up forever. We are entering a world where real estate prices, where stock prices, bond prices, gold prices, oil prices, and every other commodity and security on the planet fall continuously down to the right. That's my belief. You can agree with it, you cannot agree with it, but I do think it is compelling to at least consider the possibility that your financial advisor, their job is to preserve your purchasing power in the face of monetary destruction. Their job is not to find which is the best form of money. Okay, your financial advisor has not studied different political currencies in the history or monetary history. They simply have not done that. Or if they have, it's been dwarfed by the amount of research and time and energy and effort and expense that they have put into learning about portfolio theory, into learning about the happenings of the last 50 years. And that's my concern. Most financial advisors are looking at the past 50 years, 80 years of asset prices in American history, and they're forgetting the thousands of years previous to it. Because, us humans, myself included, are biased by our modern technologies and luxuries, and that's where we set ourselves up for danger. So, the other thing to consider too when it comes to bias is that most financial advisors can't talk about Bitcoin. They simply can't. And that's not conspiracy. That's not me making it up. It's true. Most financial advisors, or at least many of them, cannot talk about Bitcoin. I have gotten messages from dozens and dozens and dozens of financial advisors, many of which manage millions of dollars and have worked with literally thousands, if not tens of thousands of clients. And they tell me, Luke, I really appreciate you make this content because I can't talk to my clients about this. All I can do is send them your videos. All I can do is point them in the direction of these books and of these people because I can't talk about it officially when I'm in their office with you. And many of them have conflict with that. I know financial advisors that have quit their entire career that they have been building up because they have this conflict where they tell me, Luke, I believe in Bitcoin and I think it's really important, but I simply can't do it anymore. I can't be a financial advisor to these clients and keep recommending them these assets and these securities and these bonds when I don't think they should be having the allocations or buying these things. It's that kind of conflict that causes them to leave, causes them to quit, causes them to start up their own firms outside of traditional financial advisory roles. Like, those people exist. If you don't believe me, they're out there. And of these dozens that I've messaged with over the last 6-7 months especially, I've only recorded 4 podcasts with financial advisors. 4. Just 4. Okay? And 3 of those 4 were those kinds of people that left the traditional financial advisor role into Bitcoin for that precise reason. And that's why they were able to talk to me, because many of the others that I invited onto my show, that I've invited onto my YouTube channel here, that I've invited to record things with and do content with just to talk things through, they can't. They can't make a public appearance on my show because specifically Bitcoin. And so that's something to consider, whether you're pro-Bitcoin or anti-Bitcoin. If you have a group of people and you're seeking their counsel, and routinely people within that group that have a different viewpoint are leaving, either voluntarily or by force, that's something to really keep in mind. If certain viewpoints are not welcomed, allowed, or able to be advocated for to the same degree as other perspectives, that might distort the information you may be getting. So that's something to consider as well. So what do I advocate for personally? I advocate that people should be getting off zero. If you're watching this, and if you've been watching this long, you probably have a financial advisor. I would strongly recommend, not as a financial advisor, but as one of those gun-ho Bitcoin people, you should probably get off zero with your Bitcoin allocation. If you have 0% Bitcoin allocation, you should probably get off zero. Because if what I said earlier is true, you having 0.000000 Bitcoin is probably going to be a very expensive mistake. Because I am convinced we are going to witness that paradigm shift occur in the coming 5, 15, 20 years or so, where all of a sudden people realize asset prices aren't going up, they're going down. Monetary premiums no longer flowing from the currency to the assets, but the assets to the currency. And the only inexcusable allocation you can have in that situation is 0 Bitcoin. And so I don't care what percent you pick. You should pick a percent you can sleep at night with. Okay, maybe that's 1%. Maybe that's 10%. Maybe that's 30%. 40% even. I don't think any of those percentages are unreasonable. But if you can't sleep with 40% because of Bitcoin's volatility, quote unquote, you should not do that. You should pick a percentage that you feel comfortable with. And I would suggest, personally, that you sell off bonds first before you sell off your real estate or your stocks or your gold. You should probably sell off your bonds first. That's my opinion. Let's say you have a 60% allocation to bonds and a 40% allocation to stocks. And let's say you want to sell off 10% of your bonds for Bitcoin. Okay, that means that you now have a 40% allocation of stocks, and then a 54% allocation of bonds, and a 6% allocation of Bitcoin. That is great. You are ahead of 99% of the world. And that allocation alone, in 10 years, 20 years, is going to be life-changing. Not because Bitcoin's going to go up so much, you're going to get rich quick. No. Because I believe that your other 94%, your bonds and your stocks, will decline exponentially. And your tiny little allocation of Bitcoin will save will offset those losses. Okay, let me say it again. I encourage you to get off zero, not because Bitcoin's going to go up and you're going to get rich. I encourage you to get off zero because right now, it is the perfect time where it's late enough that it's clear Bitcoin has a place in the world, but it's early enough that most people haven't caught on. It's the ideal time that a small allocation will have a great defense against the losses in your other assets. And I'm telling you, in 5 years, in 8 years, in 10 years, once more people begin to figure this out, it will not be so easy. You will not be having a 6% allocation to Bitcoin and be able to sleep at night. You will have to take a 30% or 40% or a 60% allocation to Bitcoin in order to get the same exposure to Bitcoin that today you could get for just a few percent. Okay, that's my encouragement. Right now, we're in this period where you could get exposed to this new paradigm and the new system with minimal potential loss or with minimal allocation. But in the future, when timelines become shortened and people become more desperate and people begin to realize what is possibly happening, people begin to realize that locomotive is coming and it's coming faster. We've not seen anything like it before, and this really changes everything. In the same way that people that see the locomotive coming begin to sell off their optimism, their shares, or their future in the horse industry in favor of the locomotive, it's probably going to be the same here. And so I would argue any percentage at this current time, recording this in 2023, is good. You know, aim for 5%, in my opinion, at least. I think you should be able to sleep at night. The stock market goes up or down a couple percent every few days. 5% is not going to kill you, especially if we're talking about 5% of your bond portfolio. And that is enough that I'm proud of you. But obviously, I think the more you learn about Bitcoin, the higher allocation you will take. You know, I think eventually, if you take a 5% allocation, you will eventually be taking a 50%, 60% allocation. I do genuinely think that. Even if you're 60 or even if you're 65, most people will begin to realize that Bitcoin actually, and I know for a lot of you watching this may sound counterintuitive, Bitcoin is probably lower risk than bonds in the long term. And again, you can think I'm crazy for saying that, but it's what I genuinely believe. And you might be skeptical of me saying that because you might think, oh, well, he's just biased in favor of Bitcoin. Again, you're right to assume that. And you should be just as skeptical when your financial advisor says you need 0% allocation to Bitcoin because bonds are lower risk than Bitcoin. Okay? That's my perspective. That you should de-risk. You should stop speculating in corporate paper stocks. You should stop speculating in government regulations of housing, real estate. You should stop speculating in government political currency promises, aka fiat currency and bonds. You should stop speculating in these promises of human beings and instead take a small allocation, get off zero, and put a little bit of trust and a little bit of faith in a computational algorithm, a computational system that is getting more and more expensive exponentially to reproduce. Bitcoin has already gotten 50 trillion times more difficult to reproduce in its 15 years of existence, and it's only going to get more difficult to reproduce. And I know online I talk all the time about how Bitcoin's going to $100,000 a coin, $1 million a coin, 10 million, $100 million per Bitcoin. I do genuinely believe that. I have my biases, I may have my flaws, but if that's true, you really need to have more than a 0% allocation. So what do? Well, that's up to you. Of course, I do have my services. I do have my offers. I do consulting. You can find that link in the description. My prices do go up over time, and I believe they will go up over time very significantly, because I think there's going to be a massive discrepancy between people in demand of learning about Bitcoin, wanting to understand how Bitcoin works and what they can do in regards to Bitcoin, and compared to the supply of people like me that can answer those questions with reason and with patience of people, helping them understand the basics. So if you want to schedule the counseling or coaching, talk about Bitcoin, talk about anything at all, that is there for you, that opportunity. If you want to instead have a more personal and a more direct hand-holding and walking through the process, you could join me at the Bitcoin Advisor. The Bitcoin Advisor is a company that specializes in collaborative custody solutions and helps people, especially high net worth individuals, understand what the risks are of various custody strategies, help understand the benefits, the pros and the cons. It is not a financial advisory company. We don't give specific financial advice. We don't tell you when to buy Bitcoin. We don't tell you how much Bitcoin to buy. We just help you understand the potential risks or the potential benefits of choosing various Bitcoin strategies. So if either of those options interest you, those links are in the description. Obviously, I do get paid for those. However, I do genuinely believe this. I was making content long before I was getting paid to do this. I'm not getting paid to make this video. I'm just sharing my perspective. Financial advisors are great because financial advisors help us have less emotion in our decisions. But of course, financial advisors also have their biases in the same way I have my biases. And so I think you should really consider the possibility that their biases for thousands of cumulative hours over the course of their career and thinking about how to avoid debasement has potentially blinded them to the obvious reality staring them in the face that we have a money now that does not have debasement. And the implications of that are not just different, they're not just new, they're the polar opposite. So please consider taking a coaching call, link in the description. You have it with me, phone call. You can have as many as you want, or you can join me at the Bitcoin Advisor if you want a more hands-on approach, and I could help you there. So I hope this thought process has been helpful for you. I really encourage you to continue thinking about it, because right now I think only more and more people are going to begin thinking about this. And I think many of the realizations are beautiful, but also uncomfortable. And so my hope is to help relieve that discomfort as you continue to learn more about this different technological paradigm.